we do roll call.
Okay.
Call to order the regular meeting of the Rio Dell City Council. Roll call, please.
Mayor Garnes,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Woodall,
Here.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Strand,
Here.
Councilmember Wilson,
Here.
City Manager,
Here.
Finance Director Dillingham,
Here.
Chief of Police Connor,
Here.
Community Development Director Caldwell, Water Roadway Superintendent Jensen, Wastewater Superintendent Taylor, and City Clerk
Joe's
Dunham.
here, but
Okay, thank you.
He's not unmuted. He's muted.
Oh, who's here? I'm sorry.
I see Derek's name and the phone thing, but it also shows that he's muted.
Oh,
There
okay,
he
so, okay.
Here.
What about Randy Jensen? Are you available?
I don't see Randy's name.
Okay. All right, I'll take it with that. I think Kevin might be joining in a little bit late.
Thank you. Is that the roll call?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I will stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think I'm at them backwards. Now I will turn the meeting over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. There is a different method that we're using to incorporate public comment for this evening's meeting. So I'm going to try to switch the screen over to the shared screen. And bear with me here as we do this, and I'll move over to find our agenda for this evening. So under the public health comment, what we have done in the past is had the public comment emailed in. We were able to access and do public comment live, so people now can call in to the meeting. We still are accepting emailed public comments, but this section here, if you can see on your screen at the top of your, or at the bottom of the front page of your agenda, presents the information in terms of how to access the Zoom meeting live. So if you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this on Access Humboldt, in order to participate in the public comment section, there's a couple steps that you have to engage in. So the first step is you got to call 1-888-475-4499. And then the second step is, when prompted, to enter the meeting ID number, which is 871-1625-9049. And that will log you into the meeting so you can listen to the meeting live over the phone. When it comes time for public comment, the final step is to dial *9. So *9 will raise your hand in the room, and then we can unmute you for the 3-minute public comment section. So again, folks want to call 1-888-475-4499, enter meeting ID number 871-1625-9049, and then if you want to comment on an agenda item, during that agenda item, you would dial *9 on your phone, and that will raise your hand and we'll know to call on you. So this is a different setup for this year in terms of how this meeting, excuse me, in terms of how we're handling this particular COVID situation and public comment. We should be able to do this and have the meeting ID number and phone number available for each of the meetings. And you'll look in the future at the front page of any agenda, and we'll have the meeting number and the ID number available. So with that, I will return it back to the mayor.
Thank you, City Manager, and thank you for working that all out. Public presentations. This is the time for persons who wish to address the council on any matter not on the agenda and over which the council has jurisdiction. As such, a dialogue with the council or staff is not intended. Items requiring council action not listed on this agenda may be placed on the next regular agenda for consideration if the council directs, unless a finding is made by at least 2/3 of the council that the item came up after the agenda was posted and is of an urgency nature requiring immediate action. Please limit comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. City Clerk, are there any calls? Any raised hands?
No, Mayor well, Kyle is monitoring that, I believe, but we did receive 2 emails by through public comment through email. One is unrelated to tonight's agenda items, and one is related, and it has to do with the homelessness. So I can read the unrelated item now, and then we could, at the time we discuss the homelessness, we could read that one.
Thank you.
So the first unrelated item is from Al Petrovich, and the subject is Safe Routes to School Project Unresolved Issues. The request is to please place this important issue on the agenda. The project is currently underway, and it is important to do it right, or we will have to live with the consequences, such as the city of Rio Dell having to pay for the remedy. My particular concern is the portion right in front of my house, the intersection of Scenic Way and Eloa Avenue. Needless to say, I am quite familiar with this intersection. The design has issues that create a conflict in the use of lanes. Trucks with trailers turning left from Scenic Way to Eloa in the direction of CC Market have to enter and occupy the right turn lane and then swing left onto Eloa Avenue, utilizing the entire bike lane, and then the trailer will clip the corner of the traffic lane coming from CC Market. This is with the driver driving with great precision and no room for error. It would take just 1 foot of misjudgment to strike a vehicle. This design flaw is unnecessary and a simple fix. There is plenty of room in existing pavement to correct the issue. Why would someone design an intersection that creates a conflict in the use of lanes, even allowing the supposed bike lane to be depended upon for turning trucks, bikes, and parked cars, opening doors all into that same bike lane? The fix is to utilize the existing pavement by moving the proposed sidewalk and gutter on the southwest corner of Eloa and Scenic back towards CC Market, thus widening the intersection and making it functional for traffic and pedestrians. The argument is that it would create a longer crosswalk. My response to that is we have even longer crosswalks on Wildwood Avenue that has a greater volume of traffic. The short crosswalk cannot come at the cost of constricting the safe flow of traffic when it is unnecessary to do so. Both pedestrian and vehicle use can be made to function with a balance of safety between the two. This can be done without either one being compromised into a position of dangerous conflict of use. It is prudent and necessary to halt all work at this intersection until it is resolved. There was a meeting with City of Rio Dell Public Works Department, the engineer from GHD, the city manager Kyle, and myself. Cones were laid out to give visualization to the current plan and then move in a way to correct the problems. All were in agreement. It was to be put on a new plan as we all agreed. That is not what was done. It was drawn back up similar to as before. I tried to get this issue on the city council agenda on Friday. Let us bring everyone back to the table with full accountability and get this done right. GHD's engineering's own computer model shows the problem with the plan. I will gladly meet with the council members or others to go over all the issues with the current proposal. All the best, most sincerely, Al Petrovich.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time?
Mayor Garnes, there are no other, hang on one second. Let me just double check. There's no other public comment at this time.
Thank you. will move on to the consent calendar. Would anyone like to remove anything from the consent calendar?
I want to go back to this issue of the ATP project and see if any of the other,
Would you like to ask for it to be put on the agenda, or ask for an overall vote to have it? It isn't on the agenda, so it isn't something we can discuss unless we do the procedure.
exactly. I'd like to know if anyone else feels that this is of an urgent nature and immediate action needs to be taken, because they're already pouring these sidewalks. This is not what we looked at when we looked at all these plans, and ATP, these people came and we had all those meetings so that they could meet their quotas and show their presentations. And then when the actual plans come, they're completely different than what we discussed. So I'm very concerned about it.
Counsel?
I am also concerned, as Councilmember Strand said.
Yeah.
My assumption is that we would have had approved for construction plans even to go out to bid. So I don't understand why plans have changed since they were presented to the council. I'd like to see it.
Councilmember Woodall?
Pardon?
I'm trying to get a consensus of 2/3 of the council so that we can actually have a discussion about this.
I agree.
Councilmember Johnson?
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Here we are talking about it. So, city manager, what, with regard to the email, or the email, was there a discussion with the contractor, with you and Randy Jensen, agreements? What would you speak to this, please?
So in terms of the Brown Act, I'm not really sure that this is, I don't think that this is compliant with the Brown Act. It would be something that would have to be agendized for a future meeting and duly noticed. But there have been no changes to the plan that are outside of the scope of the project. We've been in discussions with Mr. Petrovich about minor changes to meet some of his concerns. None of them are substantive changes to the project or changes that are outside of the scope of the city manager's authority to make the changes. As far as Mr. Petrovich makes a number of assertions in his letter, I would encourage him to have a conversation directly with me and the engineer. I think he may have a lot of mistaken understandings that are easily solved.
I spoke with the engineer and with Mr. Petrovich.
So, excuse me, I'm sorry, just excuse me for one moment so I can make sure that we're doing it properly. City manager.
Yeah, this is not a Brown Act compliant conversation. If the council wants to schedule a special meeting, we can do that. One of my concerns though is just that there's going to be additional costs associated with that in terms of having the appropriate people on the line at the appropriate time. This was agendized for discussion at the last regularly scheduled city council meeting, and there was no discussion of it. So,
Would have been nice the plans.
We're happy to have and schedule another conversation, but again, it's something that when the question is raised, I'm happy to try to answer folks' questions. But unfortunately, I don't think that this, meets the Brown Act requirements.
I have a question on the urgency issue.
Because they're pouring.
If something's not done, they're in the process of doing the work right now. If you wait very long, the work's going to be done, and it will literally be cast in concrete. So
That's right.
we need to do something quicker,
Now.
very quick. If it's not tonight, it needs to be within the next day or two.
Manager, what is your definition of urgent? If it isn't this, or do we need to take a vote? What is there a way?
There's no ability to have this even to alter anything, it would have to be a special meeting. So the council's already authorized this project to go through as, you know, as designed. And that is not, you know, has not changed in a substantive way. Mr. Petrovich has made requests that would break the project out of the scope of what Caltrans has approved. And so it's a conversation that we've had with Mr. Petrovich. I would, again, encourage him to come talk to staff. At this point, we've already gone through at least 13 meetings on the ATP project with plenty of input. And, you know, we have suggested some potential changes, minor deviations from the design, and Mr. Petrovich seemed to be okay with that, and now suddenly he's writing letters stating that there's something, you know, fundamentally wrong here, which is not the case. So again, I would encourage Mr. Petrovich to get a hold of city staff to work out the issue.
Mayor Garnes, may I speak?
Absolutely.
Mr. Petrovich showed me a drawing Sunday that he received from GHD, had GHD's stamp on it, that he received after the discussion, I believe Thursday or Friday, whenever they met as a group and placed the cones that he referenced. And in that drawing that he showed, the street, and then he also had drawings that he had previously that were issued by the GHD, but the road size has changed, the curbs have moved, the crosswalks have moved, the stop sign has moved farther south about 15, 20 feet in the middle of the intersection. The computer model shows the truck's path turning into, as he mentions in his public comment, taking the bike lanes and all the other lanes, and it doesn't look like a very workable thing, but it does look like more than just minor changes. It looks like at least a half a dozen plus changes compared to what the city council showed in all these meetings that we attended throughout. And I thought the thing had been solved and was done. And now I'm hearing and seeing drawings that have been generated in the last few days.
So do we need to have a special meeting, city manager? Because clearly we're still discussing it. So
it's up to the council. If the council wants to wade into the detail, we would need to have a special meeting on as soon as I can arrange to have everybody on a phone call.
So
and comply with.
to not pour that particular thing until we have the meeting is
Correct.
okay. So I think that's what everybody's kind of suggesting here. I think you have 2/3 of the council at least saying, you know, we need to address this before they pour it, because once they pour it, it's poured. So if you could schedule a meeting as soon as possible, that would be excellent.
Mayor Garnes,
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
thank you, Mayor Garnes. I don't think it's appropriate to get the city council involved. I think this is a matter between our engineer, staff, and the property owner. And I think they just need to put a set of plans on the hood of a truck and talk about it and come to some resolution. I do not think the council, I don't think this is an item at all for the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall, what is your feeling here?
Well, I'll go along with Councilman Johnson and see if they can, and then if it cannot be worked out between them, then maybe. But I think it should be with the engineers, Al Petrovich, and our city staff to begin with.
Thank you.
I would like to say that Al Petrovich met with Randy. They went over the plans and nothing was changed. And I don't think it's just this area of Al's house either. The turn up onto Bellevue is not also what we discussed.
We are still so discussing this.
Well, I don't agree with the city manager either. I believe that this is of urgent nature and it needs immediate action.
Well, I understand
Exactly what you
you're saying,
read.
and I do agree that once you pour something, it's a done deal, and then we're in a space.
That's right.
Unfortunately, 3 and 2 does not equal 2/3, and so I have no choice other than to go with the 2/3 law, or whatever it is, the ordinance, rule, and turn it over to the city manager and just simply ask the city manager to have a conference with this group.
Mayor Garnes,
Yes,
does this mean that the work halts until there is a resolution between all of these parties?
I don't think we can discuss. I understand what you're saying, Councilmember Wilson. I am simply going by the 2/3 law, and 3 and 2 is not going to equal 2/3, and yet we're still discussing it. That's why I asked the city manager to get the parties together as soon as he can and have a conversation and try and work whatever has to be worked out. But my understanding is at this point,
if my understanding is correct, we need 2/3 of a vote to have the discussion tonight, but in order to call a special meeting, that only requires a consensus. Is that correct?
that's correct, city manager.
Yeah, you can have, yes.
So, okay, it's really difficult because we need to know.
If the council would like to have it agendized, first of all, we would have to find a schedule, a time available. And if 3/5 of the council wants it agendized at a special meeting, we can do that.
Is there, I don't know if this is out of line. I will ask you, and if it's out of line, just tell me it's out of line and I'll retract the question. Is there anything that having the city council coming together to talk about this, is there anything that we have the authority to do, or is this is kind of out of our zone now and it's in the city's operational zone? That's just a question. If you can't answer it, that's fine.
Yeah, so the council's already signed off on the project and basically left these type of change orders up to staff to work with folks if that happens. The council can, rescind that and intervene. There is a risk associated with that, which are cost overruns, which are delays, which are possible. So without having it agendized, I don't know that we can have too much of a conversation about it. But if the council wants, what we can try to do is schedule a meeting as soon as possible. There's lots of work for the crew to do outside of that area, and we can have that conversation. But again, it eats into staff time, and it eats into the contingency and funds available to do some of the additives that we had talked about before at the last regularly scheduled meeting when this was agendized for discussion at the last regular city council meeting.
Is this something that you would be willing to get together, not have him call you, but is this something that you're willing to get together again with Mr. Petrovich and Mr. Jensen and the engineering company?
Nathan.
Is that something that you can?
Yeah, we have been in regular contact with Mr. Petrovich. So I don't know why he decided suddenly to jump to conclusions. We did have a conversation with him, and I think there's an explanation for all, as I said before, for his concerns. But You know, and I think that could easily be worked out between city staff and Mr. Petrovich, but it will be up to, you know, the council will need to decide if it wants to intervene in this situation.
Well, I mean, my position is if as we know everyone else's position, my position is that I feel like it is under the city manager right now to handle it, and that what is, I think will end up happening is we'll deal with that, but then now we're in a meeting, and now, as it's already been pointing out, down the road there's some other problem, and so then we're going to actually just end up redoing everything, and which is going to cause cost overruns. It's going to cause all manner of contract issues, and it isn't that I don't think that there's a legitimate issue here. I'm just hoping that the city manager can commit to working sometime before this is poured. Have this conversation and try and work this out, because I think other than that, we're going to end up addressing a lot of more issues that is just going to become this big thing. Quagmire, a big quagmire. So I don't know if, well, I think I've gotten everyone else's opinion, unless anyone else wants to say something.
Just briefly, that the city, the staff and the city manager and the engineering firm, and from what, and I haven't had conversations with all of the engineers, but there is a drawing generated by GHD that does not appear to be what was discussed and agreed upon by the whole group when they talked. And this has gone on apparently more than one time, kind of at GHD's, when the drawing comes back after what they discussed. And if they can get something resolved, fine. But if they're not, then the council needs to get in and get people straight. And if what we've authorized the city manager wasn't to change the issues, but I'm being told that it's some pretty major changes in the functional and safety aspects of this route for the kids. This is a safe route for kids. The bike lane has trucks in it, has vehicles. So that doesn't sound
That's a
safe
serious
route for
thing.
kids.
So I'm willing to have a meeting about it, but I would say it would have to be specifically on that one thing, because I can't get behind, let's go over the entire thing over again when it's already in motion. So I would not be for that, but I mean, I understand what you're saying about the children. I understand if something's been changed, legitimately changed, and creates an absolute hazard, then absolutely, if it cannot be resolved between the city manager and the city engineers, then the council should step in. I'm just really hoping that it can be resolved. Can you, city manager, can you reach out tomorrow, let's say, to the engineers, to Mr. Petrovich, see what the issue, if it can be resolved. If it cannot be resolved, will you schedule a special meeting of the council?
That sounds fine to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know, excuse me, Mayor Garnes, but I think we need a vote on that, don't we?
Okay. I don't know, but I'm sure we must. Is there a motion for the city manager to tomorrow try and work out the details of this problem with Mr. Petrovich and the city engineers? And if it cannot be resolved, to bring it to a special meeting as soon as possible with the city council.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All, roll call vote, please.
Mayor Garnes,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Woodall,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
No.
Councilmember Strand,
Yes.
and Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
What, can
Motion
I
carries
stop for 1 minute?
4-1.
Can I stop for 1 second, Deborah? I mean, Mayor Garnes?
Can you what now?
I'm wondering if I understood what you said. I think I might have misunderstood. Would you repeat it one more time for me?
I
The
said
motion?
that, the motion was that the city manager reach out tomorrow, which would be Wednesday, May 20th, to Mr. Petrovich and the city engineers and try to
Okay.
resolve the issue. If the issue cannot be resolved, and I'm sure we will know, then the city manager will schedule a meeting with the city council to discuss that one item.
Okay. I voted what I wanted to then. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we're moving on to the consent calendar. Is there any item on the consent calendar that needs to be removed?
No. Not from me.
No, thank you, Councilmember Wilson. Would anyone else like to remove anything?
No.
I'm not going to remove anything, but I'm going to abstain from the May 5th meeting. I wasn't there.
Okay. Who was left?
No.
Councilmember Strong? No? Okay. Then, is there a motion to accept the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second it.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Garnes,
Yeah, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Woodall,
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Strand,
Yes.
Councilmember Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried. 5-0. Reports and staff communications, city manager.
Your staff report begins on page 28 of the packet. I would just remind the council that there is a nuisance committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 3 p.m. for members Strawn and Woodall. Beyond that, I'll return to the council.
Thank you, city manager. Are there any questions of staff from the council?
I'm sorry, on that nuisance committee meeting, are we doing a Zoom or?
It's a Zoom. It's the number and the meeting ID are on the packet.
I have not.
I didn't receive a packet. Oh,
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I did not.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
My understanding that Sabrina emailed them on Thursday. I got mine. I know Julie called just as I was leaving today and said she didn't get it. Sabrina's been having some problems with her email. I'll check with her when she shows up first thing and have her send those again.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
One is it just came up that Mr. Connor mentioned the email system. I found as I've been using this, particularly through this COVID process, emails that I've gotten from HWMA, normally they send me a packet, a hard copy. This time I tried to download from our website and to get things from the literature attachments. And this was very cumbersome. I had to go through some really long roundabout forwarding it to another email to finally be able to download it. So our email isn't really that friendly a system. It's just comment. I don't know what to do about it. My other question was on this 355 Center Street. That's the Bluffs, is that correct? Officer Chief Connor?
That's correct.
It looks like this thing's really picking up down there.
It has.
Is there anything that you can pinpoint as kind of a cause? Is it the shelter in place? Is that part of it, or is it? What do you see there?
Well, the majority of problems we are having there are not with the occupants, but with their guests. And the number of calls for service there has continued to increase. Unless things change significantly, you'll see an even larger list there at the next meeting. I'm going to have a conversation with Brittany and Kim Brown and try and come to some kind of resolution. But I don't have a real good answer. I know people are getting a little frustrated with the shelter in place, and that is causing problems throughout the city. But I don't know that that's particularly the problem there. There have been 3 or 4 individuals that are probably responsible for half of those calls for service.
Okay. I know that seemed to be one of the big concerns the community raised originally. It didn't seem to be as much with the who was going to be the residents. Even the lady that was the head of the local health services said that their big concern was to have the outside people would come in to try to take advantage of the people that were living in the housing complex. And so it is a concern to me.
And in my discussions when this was still in the planning and construction phase with some of the other Danco facilities, that was also their major issues when the facilities first opened. And in those situations, it was resolved by the eviction of 1 or 2 of the occupants for not being able to manage their guests. And that's one of the things that I'm going to discuss with Kim and Brittany Brown is, do we need to set an example and remind the occupants that there are rules there that need to be followed? I have no idea who that occupant would be, because it's not just one person causing all these problems, but that's part of the conversation I intend to have.
Thank you. I appreciate your diligence on this, Mr. Connor.
Mayor Garnes,
Yes.
I have a question.
Go.
Is there a security officer there? I can't remember if that was one of the things we talked about. Somebody said there was supposed to be one there 24 hours a day. Is there?
So that's probably something else I should discuss with the Browns. I have never seen a security guard there, but I work during the daytime, and it's my understanding that the security guard was going to be there at night. I am aware that the person from Health and Human Services who is supposed to work with that facility is not there due to COVID. And it may be that the security guard is not there either, but I don't know that for sure. And I will try and find that out, and I will put it in the staff update for the next meeting.
Okay. I know that some people have been saying people have been going over the fence at nighttime, from the senior from the senior center there. They've been coming in and going over that fence, and that's why I asked the question, because it'd be good to have somebody there in the evening. Thank you.
Any other questions? Staff. Are there any public hands raised, City Clerk?
That would be a question for the city
Oh,
manager.
I'm sorry. You told me that already. City
It's
Manager.
okay.
There's no public comment.
Thank you. Hearing none, we will then move on to the discussion on homelessness in Rio Dell. City Manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. On the line, we have representatives from the Rio Dell Community Resource Center, including Sarah Fott, their director. We agendized this at the request of the council at the last meeting as just a way of having a general conversation about homelessness in Rio Dell. We did include in the packet some information from the League of California Cities on homelessness and tools related to homelessness. And then I wanted to quickly go over some of the actions that the city has taken that are, pretty unique for the recent history of the city. The city did participate last year in the homeless point in time count in the run up to the as part of the run up to the Danco project unveiling. The police department conducted outreach with the Mobile Intervention and Services team out of Eureka to the homeless populations here. And we also did quite a bit of outreach in terms of getting folks to know how to access these homeless service resources that are provided mostly through the county. And that's through the coordinated entry system and 211. And various subsidized housing programs. The city's also provided transparency on the Danco project, which the council may recall. The city's main involvement in that project had to do with design review. And state law prevented the city from being further involved in the project. So the Danco briefing paper was published, putting both county representatives and representatives of the developer on record. In terms of actions that we've taken recently, this includes additional work with the mobile team from the county's Department of Health and Human Services and trying to get people registered and whatnot. So that's, as far as I'm aware, that has not happened before. I believe the county organized the point in time count last time it was done 4 or 5 years ago. And then we were involved in organizing that for this year. So with that, I think what I would do is turn this over to Sarah and see, just in general as a starting point for the conversation, if the Community Resource Center has noticed an increase in homelessness, what is your perspective on it, and why, if there is an increase, why is it happening, and what from the Resource Center's perspective can we do about it? So Sarah, I don't know if we can unmute you here.
I'm unmuted now.
Sarah, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mary, for being here.
Absolutely. So, I mean, those are hard questions to answer. On one hand, I do feel like we've seen some unfamiliar faces in the last month, but especially with the homeless or transient population, we kind of see that all year round. We see people come and go and check in just to, get bus passes to get back out of the county, or check in to get food for the few days they're stuck there until they're getting a ride from someone. So we kind of see that year round. But I would say that we've seen some new faces, and we've been hearing from our clients a lot of the issues and challenges that they're having with newer people being in town, like the fights that had broken out. We got told about that. With everyone that we encounter that identifies as not being stably housed, one of the very first things that we offer them is connection to DHHS's mental health caseworkers to try and get the process going for them to get assessed for different programs, specifically the home program is what we've been working with to try and get people on lists to get into housing. And we've been pretty successful. We, for a while, as a result of the point in time count and everything that was going on with the outreach around the cottages, we had someone coming from the home program on almost a weekly basis and meeting with clients and trying to get their screening done, getting their assessments done with clinicians so that they could get into the cottages. A few people were successful with that, and then a few people have been successful getting on other lists after that. One of the main issues with that is people being able to follow through, and it's hard to follow through when you don't have a phone, when you and we can be a message phone, but then that means they only have access to that phone for the hours that we're open. Right now we're down to 3 days a week, and we're only open 5 hours a day at those times because the hospital has asked us to pull back from full-time exposure to clientele, since we tend to work with some of the most vulnerable. So that's definitely put like a hitch in some of that housing stuff. We're having to be a little more creative and a little more immediate with services like that we're doing. The biggest thing that we are seeing right now is food insecurity, and that's for those that are living outside and those that are stably housed. We're getting a lot of people who have never been to the center before, have never received services before, that are finding themselves in need of help for the first time ever. We're seeing a big increase in people that are coming to the center for emergency food, and we're seeing a big increase in the people that are coming to the monthly distribution, which we hold at the Journey Church. By big increase, I mean, I think in February, when we counted our encounters, which were all programs and services provided, we came in at about 1,400 people touched by services. And then in the month of, no, so that would have been March. In the month of April, we were only open to the public 9 days, and we came in right under 1,100. So we're seeing just as many people. And Mary, do you have anything to add?
Just keeping in mind that the process of housing, it's a long one. It's a total uphill battle. And the people we work with, a majority of Rio Dell's homeless population is fighting that battle, and they're doing pretty good at it using their limited resources. I can understand community concern. I talked with Chief Connor, and one of a large concern is we have some people we work with that hang out outside, and that's a change from when I first started working in Rio Dell, of actually seeing people hang outside, because usually people were, like tucked away kind of. So it's kind of a change in what we're seeing with like some of the younger individuals that are coming in. However, I feel like it's like what Sarah was saying, it's going in the right direction. We have the right like resources right now working with the county programs. It's just a slow moving process.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, it might be, one of the first steps in housing is getting someone an ID, and the DMV is closed right now. So, and before that, it's helping them get their birth certificate, and it's trying to track down the county that they were born in. It's a really long process. A lot of the birth certificates have to be notarized. So then we have like a mobile notary that comes in. And especially for a while, we're kind of doing it in shifts. Like we knew the notary was going to be here at this time and DHHS was going to be here at this time. So we would just make a list of people to come. that has been harder to do since the pandemic started because a lot of DHHS workers are working remotely now. They can't come to us. They're having to do things over the phone. So it's been a bit of a hiccup, but there are the majority of the people that we are working with that are currently unhoused are working towards finding housing, are engaged in some level of service that is getting them in the direction of housing, whether it's that they've just met with home once, or we're still waiting for their birth certificate to come through, or they're still waiting to get the clinician assessment through mental health. We don't often see people who there are, the small handful that they're happy with what they're doing and they don't want to be housed. But the vast majority are working on it. It's just quite a process. And I would agree with Mary. I've been in Rio Dell for 4 years now, and this is the first time that I've seen this like socializing that's happening in these little hubs up those like 2 blocks of Wildwood. We were told that there was a community member that was sleeping outside of our resource center over the weekend when we were closed. And so we put up no loitering signs and then noticed they just happened to go to the other side of the street. And I've seen them hang out at bus stops, and they're hanging out in front of E&J. And that is something that I've never really seen. And I don't know what the change is with that, what is making them be more relaxed, especially because there are issues that are going on. We've heard that there are fights and there's yelling and things like that. So I don't know what caused that change, but we've definitely noticed it as well down on our end of town. Do you have questions that maybe we can answer and maybe we can't?
Counsel or anyone with questions?
I have a question. Is that okay, Mayor Garnes?
Yes, Councilmember Wilson?
You said that it sounds like you're working really diligently with certain individuals of the town, that you're working to find housing and that's well. Is how big of a group of homeless people are there that aren't coming to you or trying to work with you at all, that are just basically just being independent? Because we see this stuff down by the river. It seems like there's 2 sets of camps. That there's a kind of a rougher crowd on the other side of the river than the ones on this side of the river. Is validity to that?
I would say out of the ones that I can think of that are camping outside, maybe 4 that I can think of that in no way want to be housed. They're not interested. They're never going to follow through. I would actually say the most people that I know of that aren't interested are doubled up. They're in housing. They're not in stable housing. They're couch surfing, or they're staying multiple people in their parents' homes, things like that we're seeing. And they tend to be the ones who aren't interested in finding any other housing. Mary, what do you think about that?
I think since we've kind of built up a stronger relationship with the county, that there is more outreach about like what kind of service.
I don't know.
Any other questions? I would like to ask, is there a likelihood or anything that that the fact that there's no arrest, there's no moving on, pushing on, moving on, in this pandemic setting that we're in right now, unless there's a hard crime committed, could that be a part of what we're seeing?
I think it absolutely could. I think that it's a really great excuse for the ones who didn't have the intention of bettering their situation to begin with.
Right.
For people who were working towards bettering themselves, this has been a hindrance, and it's a really negative impact on them because it's slowing things down. But I can absolutely see people who didn't intend on following through with things. This is a really good excuse to not have to follow through. Yeah.
Is there, it seems like it's almost an impossible problem at any time, pandemic or not. It's a huge issue that, you know, everyone, it seems like all the communities are really trying to tackle. I don't know if there's any kind of a plan or any kind of situation where we could sit down as a group with DHS, with yourselves, to try and work some kind of plan, or even if that's realistic, because this is clearly an issue in all communities, and it's an unresolved issue in all communities. So I'm not really sure, but I was just wondering if there's any thoughts that you would have of some way we can try and tackle it. I understand, though, that those that don't want to get help or get a home or find any place to actually stabilize, no matter what, that's not going to change. And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is people who want assistance are actually trying in real time, and that this situation, being the pandemic, has simply slowed their process down. And when it's over, then hopefully things will get back to where they can start working their way back to where they were headed to begin with. So
it would be really great to have a collaboration that was working together. I think one of our biggest setbacks from the center is that we can't transport, because a lot of the inability to follow through is if Mary and I could just put them in our car and drive them to whatever appointment they're supposed to be at, or could drive them and then sit there with them, you know, and they know that we're going to be waiting for them after the mental health assessment. It's a completely different thing than expecting, especially our clients whose mental health is really severely impacted. They're not going to get on the bus and go. And prior to the pandemic, when we were working really closely with DHHS, transportation was one of the things that was being offered. The worker that we specifically were connected with would come down to Rio Dell, make a couple appointments with people, and then would drive people to Social Security to get their Social Security reinstated, or do whatever was needed, and would just like spend a day getting all of their stuff done. And since that has stopped, even the clients who were being really diligent at that point, since that transportation and initiative of a caregiver went away, then they've just dwindled, and they're now missing appointments, and they're kind of losing hope. So if we could find a way to have a community conversation and pull in DHHS, and really talk about why we need one of their regional team members to be more visual and active in our community, I would be really on board with having that conversation, because I think that would be the exact change that we need. If we had someone who could say, okay, Sarah, this is what you need, get in my car, we're going, that would change so many people's situations.
I would be willing to be in that conversation and to do anything that I can do to help. People are stressed out, you know, in the city, and I think it's part of our responsibility as council members to try and do whatever we can. And so I would be willing absolutely to sit down and have that conversation with whatever group is the group.
Well, I would like to say that part of the Bluffs situation was DHHS was supposed to be incorporating all these, and so they should already be in Rio Dell. I mean, what is because of COVID we're not doing that, or?
You don't really know what happened with that. The bulk of the connection that we've had with DHHS is the like peer support specialists have been picking up food from our resource center and from our community food distributions and taking them to the clients. But as far as them having, we were under the impression they were going to have these like rotating door offices that people were going to come down, they'd be able to do case management. They were, and we haven't heard of any of that happening. And it could be because of COVID. It could be for a lot of reasons, but from our understanding, that never started.
The case management that's provided through the county there is for the residents. So like what Sarah was saying, like we have not yet connected with that for people outside of the River Bluffs or to those services.
City
'Cause it's-
manager, is that, now, is it my understanding from you that you reached out to DHHS and they've not returned your call, or is that something that you can address with DHHS and try and get them, if nothing else, to come to speak to us as the council and explain exactly what's happening and what the position is on a Zoom meeting, even just to have the conversation so that we are all on the same page and understand, because I think all of our understanding was, with regard to the Bluff, DHHS was going to be here. They were going to be present. With regard to the homeless situation, I don't know that we've had that conversation directly with DHHS. And is there, so what I'm asking, is there a chance that you can get in touch with someone from the proper person and have them come to us and have a conversation with us to explain why they are not engaged?
Yeah, I'd be happy to arrange that.
That would be great. And I think also that if there's a committee to be had, or however, collaboration with the city, when we get in touch with DHHS, I think that should be something that happens as well, that some kind of collaboration between CRC, the city, and DHHS, because I think that's going to be the best way to approach this. Is there other council members? Could you weigh in, please?
I have a couple of questions. They're going?
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. I would like to, is Chief still on the phone?
I'm still
Chief
here.
Connors?
I'm still here.
Oh, Chief, I know it's a hard time right now with the COVID, but what kind of things can your officers do? I mean, if there's people with open containers, which I see all the time, can they address that? Or when they're sleeping on someone's porch? Now, I know if it's in a public way, you know, like the sidewalk, you probably can't do anything. But when they're on people's property, can you address it? And I noticed in Fortuna, you know, I don't notice, even when they had a lot of homeless there, you didn't notice people on Main Street sleeping in sleeping bags and in doorways. And is there something that they were doing that we can do also? I'm concerned. I know it's a hard situation with the homeless, but it's also a quality of life issue for our citizens. And we've got to weigh it out some way, because right now it isn't good. And I just didn't know if there's anything you can do as the police chief to help with this.
So open container is a citable infraction. What we found is we do write those citations, but they don't go to court, and it's an infraction, and it's a long drawn out process that they don't have money to pay for the ticket, and it eventually gets drawn out and nothing ever really happens. In terms of people sleeping on private property, we can, in some situations, issue trespass orders. We do it all the time for businesses, in which if the person comes back to that property in a 90-day period, they can automatically be arrested for trespassing. Our new RIM system allows us to flag those properties and those persons. And so an officer showing up, even though he may not have contacted this person at that location before, will know that he's not supposed to be there. In terms of sleeping on the sidewalk, the Boise decision, which you may be familiar with, basically says you cannot criminalize sleeping in a public location unless there are open beds in your shelter. We do not have a shelter. Consequently, we cannot really write citations for people sleeping in public. Doesn't mean they're allowed to set up camp. And generally, it's been our experience, if we go, you know, I kind of drive Wildwood, and when I first get into town in the morning at 7, and if I see somebody, I might give them a half hour, depending on, you know, how dark it is, what time of the year it is. But usually I'm back between 7:30 and 8 and asking them to get up and move on. And they're usually pretty good about it. And it's been my experience that people sleeping in the alcoves and in the bus stops are not our regular homeless population. It's the population that arrives for a short stay and then moves on. And they tend to sleep in the open because they don't have an established camp or place to go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Johnson? Sean?
Yes,
Wilson?
I have a couple of comments, Mayor Garnes. Several months ago, I was up at the Last Chance Grade stakeholders meeting, and I sat next to a council member from Crescent City, and his day job is working for the County of Del Norte and working with the homeless. And I was bragging about the Danco project and getting 24 people or more off of the streets. And his comment to me was, expect a 10% success ratio. That is 90% of the people are going to be back on the street. And I thought, that's pretty darn dismal. And I was thinking about the model. I mean, that's a government model right there. And I was thinking about the model that the Eureka Rescue Mission has in Eureka. And I phoned the executive director, Brian Hall, yesterday and chatted with Brian about some of their programs. And they've got a 1-year program for men to get them off of the street, get them changed lives. And this is, of course, a faith-based operation. And I asked Brian, I said, what's your success ratio? And he said, for the men that get through the program, It's 90%. Well, this is staggering. Government has 10% success. Faith-based has 90% success. It just points out to me where we need to be investing our money. It's not in the government, but it's the faith-based side of the equation. Eureka Rescue Mission is also talking about having the same type of program for the ladies so that they can get off the street and stay off the street forever. So just some comments about faith-based versus government. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wilson or Councilmember Strawn?
I'm good. They've answered, I think they've done a very good job with, and I appreciate what they're doing on both the ladies and their agencies. It's a big deal. And I appreciate Mr. Johnson's comment as well on the faith-based. They seem to do better than the government. Government's not doing the greatest. They're trying, but it doesn't seem to work for some reason. Thank you.
Mayor Garnes? Mayor Garnes?
Yes.
Oh, it's hard for me to hear. If we did have a meeting like with the DHS and other people, it might be interesting to have the gentleman that Councilman Johnson was talking about come to the meeting also.
Okay.
Mayor Garnes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We do have a guest who just called in. So Connie Beck is the director of the Department of Health and Human Services with the County of Humboldt. So she was trying to log into the meeting and is definitely interested in having a conversation with the council. So Connie, if you can hear me, I'm going to unmute you to see if there's anything to add to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Yeah, I was trying to call in. I had heard earlier today that you were talking about homelessness on this meeting, and so I was listening and I was trying to call in, and I was sort of like even frantic because I was feeling like I needed to talk. Mayor Garnes, I would love to meet with you and Kyle and talk out what we can do to support or more support what we're doing in the city of Rio Dell. I feel like your Family Resource Center is amazing. And the folks that are doing the work down there, I hear really great things, and I know they participate in our weekly calls that we've been having since COVID started. I just have to say, I was not aware that our staff person wasn't present at the River Bluff. So I just want to name that. I am really frustrated about that right now. But also I think there's really good work happening down there. And so I just want to be sure to say that, not just with River Bluff, but with your resource center and our street outreach folks so I want to have a better conversation about what the needs are in the city of Rio Dell. And then just to the other comments with about Brian Hall and the mission and that. Brian does really great work. Betty Chin does really great work. All of our community partners work really hard to reduce the homeless population and get people back to work and doing good things. We need everyone to do this because there's not one it's going to take all of us to do this work. So whatever we can do to support that. I'm worried because of COVID and the economy, that we may not be able to provide the services that are needed in the community because of the need. I worry about that, but I just wanted to just say, please let's schedule some kind of meeting so we can have a conversation. And I would love to support what you guys are doing.
Thank you very much.
And
Connie.
thank
I
you,
would love to-
Sarah. And is it Mary? Yeah, thank you guys so much for the work that you're doing there.
All right. Thank you, Connie. They waved and smiled when you said that. So they're both muted, but thank you, Connie. And I would love to have a meeting and sit down with yourself and the city manager. So hopefully city manager maybe can schedule that and we can make it happen. Thank you for calling in too. That's greatly appreciated. And Sarah and Mary, that you two are so appreciated. And I hope, even though we're kind of, more or less complaining that something has to be done, but we do totally appreciate what you're doing. So are there any other comments from council?
I would just like to know what dates, what times and days are you open?
So we are currently open Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 10 to 3.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Are there any public comments, questions, city manager?
I am seeing none, Mayor Garnes.
Thank you.
We do have one comment received via email.
Thank you, city manager. Would you read that, please?
Okay, this is from Renata Laughlin, 570 Gunderson Lane. And she said, her comment is this: I noticed City of Arcata appears to have a dedicated homeless area on G Street south of the plaza. There is a collection of tents on a parking area. If we can't disallow homeless from camping here, perhaps we can dedicate an area that would help promote social distance guidelines, address sanitation and safety concerns. Not sure if Arcata's area is a publicly owned parcel or if it's a public-private partnership. If an area was established, perhaps a person limit and time limit could be set. Once filled, additional persons could be placed on a waiting list. Those whose time is up would be asked to leave. Perhaps bus vouchers could be secured for transportation to their next town choice. My specific complaints about the homeless congregation is concern about their safety, disease transmission, lack of social distancing, lack of hand washing facilities, etc. About sanitation issues that could affect our drinking water supply, homeless camps adjacent to the river and sewage runoff into the Eel River, and people loitering in front of businesses and wandering into traffic, Wildwood and Monument. I don't think allowing camping by the river is safe, especially considering communities use the Eel River as a drinking water source. The homelessness issue is a public safety issue and needs thoughtful consideration. Thank you for your opportunity to provide input.
Thank you, city manager. Good comment. Hopefully we can work that topic into a broader conversation between all the group members that when we come together to have this discussion.
May I comment on that, Mayor Garnes? I know that is the transportation piece in particular is something that we have been working with the police department for the last couple of years. We've been specifically getting bus tickets that will get community members to Eureka if they are needing to get connected with a resource, but we've also been helping with a lot of the transportation assistance program to get people out of the county if they've got someone they can connect with and go elsewhere. So I think that quite a few of the people that come through, like word gets around that they can get bus tickets from the resource center if they need to get somewhere. But that's absolutely something that if you encounter anyone who has, especially people that aren't from the area, tend to just, they ride the bus as far south as they can, and then they're stuck in Scotia and they don't understand how to get out of that area. They absolutely can come to the resource center and we can help them either get back to Eureka and have them going to a specific appointment or agency that's going to be able to help them, or we can help get that process started for that transportation out of the county as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm thinking that this then is a closed item on the agenda, and we will move forward. Thank you all for being here. Both, thank you, Sarah, Mary, and Connie. It was very, very much appreciated, and I look forward to sitting down with the city manager and speaking with you all and trying to work something out.
Thank you all for having us, and we will leave. And have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay. Now we will move on to the presentation on the proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2021.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. I'm going to try to pull this up on the screen here. The budget item for this evening begins on page 81 of your packet. So we did meet last week to have kind of a preview of the budget and discussion over the budget item back on May 12th. So part of the changes that have occurred to the document since you saw it last, there was the consensus direction of the council to place $200,000 into contingencies. Staff has placed an additional $6,000 into the city manager's budget for COVID related costs. There has been a reduction of about $20,000 to correct salary costs for public works staff. In addition, $3,100 in CDBG revenue has been added based on budgeted expenses. So, the document in your packet is the up-to-date current budget where we're at, and we will start to go through the material here. So first, just to cover the calendar real quick. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can make this a little bit easier to see. So for this month in May, the council held its last budget session on the 12th. Today is the 19th, where the city manager and staff recommend the operating capital budget. And then we have some time next week also to hold special budget meetings as necessary. And in June, depending on the council direction, we can aim for a June 2nd adoption of the final budget. Or right now, what we would present is basically a revised recommended operating capital budget based upon council changes. And then we can also have additional special meetings in early June. And then according to the calendar, we are projected for a final adoption on the 16th of of June. So we have lots of time to work on this. In terms of prioritization, we were unable to pull together the 2020 prioritization in between the study session and this presentation. So that's something we can try to work in between now and the next session. But over the past few years, over the past 3 years, pretty consistently, we see street work as a top priority of the City Council. We've seen code enforcement and really economic development items coming to bear on the as the top City Council priorities. So this particular budget, I think, is in line with the past priorities so far. But certainly, if the council wants to add or subtract based upon the council's priorities, we can have that conversation. So one of the questions that came up during the last meeting had to do with LAIF and just an explanation of where city funding is located. So the actual funds of the city are located with in various accounts with U.S. Bank general checking. So that's for payroll and day-to-day, week-to-week billing. And then the rest of city funds are placed into the LAIF account, which is the local agency investment fund, which is a voluntary program set up by the state of California that has certain protections for revenues. And what the guiding principles for LAIF are really safety, liquidity, and then yield. So safety and yield don't typically go together. So really what you have here is essentially a savings account that's at its maximum is going to generate 2.5% return each year to the various funds that are in the account. So this is a very basic setup of where the funding is located. There have been some questions about the state intervening and borrowing LAIF funds or preventing the city from pulling LAIF funds out. But there are certain protections in law regarding these funds to prevent the state from doing that. Otherwise, there probably wouldn't be too many agencies investing in the fund. So currently, there's about 2,400 local agencies in California that deposit with LAIF, and the total balance of LAIF California-wide is a little over $30 billion. So, and again, in the bank accounts is just a kind of a standard checking account. There's no interest accruing on the balance there. So in your packet, Cheryl Dillingham is on the line, and one of the things you will have noticed starting on page 82 is the recommended budget summary. There were some other questions during the workshop that the council had asked, and Cheryl provides answers to those questions in the summary. And so I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl to have her go over the presentation.
So Kyle, I'm here. Can you put it up on the screen?
Yes, I'm working on it.
Can you hear me? Do I sound okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right, we're at the top, Cheryl.
No, well, it doesn't look like the top to me. Go up a little more, or it's probably delayed. There, okay. So basically, this is a new format where I was trying to do a kind of a summary of the recommended budget. The this is the city's fiscal year 2021, which will run from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. And basically, the total recommended budget at this point is 4.56 million. The major budgeted funds included in the budget are the general fund, which supports the police services, city operations, and most of the discretionary costs of the city. And it makes up about 33% of the budget. And then sewer and water make up 31 for sewer and 23 for water. And those are our major funds that we operate with. And then the budget for the general fund is 1.5 million. Water fund about $1 million. Oh, that looks like I made a typo there. Sorry. The sewer fund should have 1.39, not 1.521. And then at the department level, there's a graph showing budgeted activities by department. And you can see that the police department is the largest expenditure for the city, with sewer coming in second, capital projects coming in third, water, debt service is the funds that the city has borrowed to do water and sewer improvements. Then we have finance, city manager, contingencies, this is the 200,000 that we discussed earlier. And then streets, buildings and grounds, and I don't know that we need to go all the way down. So then one of the questions that had been asked at the last meeting was about total city salary and benefit costs. So I put together a little table that has the actual salary and benefit costs for 2018, 2019, the budget for 2020, and then the proposed budget for 2021. This does not include that contingency. This is the baseline proposed budget. Salaries and benefits make up about $2 million of the budget, which represents about 45% of the total budget. There was an increase of $44,095 from the prior year, or 2%, and this was primarily due to increased health insurance costs. And if there's any more questions about that, I could take a stop here, or do you want me to keep going?
Well, I do have some questions, Cheryl.
Go ahead,
So I gotta find my paper, sorry. In going over this schedule that you made at the top, so not every account is listed here that was listed on the budget you gave us last week.
These are just the salary and benefit accounts.
and that's sufficient answer.
So I'm just looking here. I wrote them down and now I can't find my. So you totaled across without the, okay, so you say again what you just said. This is just the
salary and benefits.
And to put it in a format like I asked, you chose to put it in this format instead. And to get a total of all expenditures, is that impossible to get, or why are we only getting this much?
So what?
The total expenditures are on the summary sheet on the front page.
Page 82.
Yeah.
So $4,563,555.
And so since we're on page 82, I have a question on the budget activity schedule there. So let's take Randy, for instance. So when I look at this, and so is all of
Are you talking about
water is going to be all under Randy's, is his payroll all under water?
No, that was on the schedule that we had in the last packet that I don't actually have. We didn't put that in the current packet, which had how they were all broken down.
So this is just by department. So when I look at the city manager, then that's not a true, because his is broke out by sewer and water. So is this a true representation?
I'm not quite following you, because the budget by activity is the total budget by activity, not just salaries and benefits.
Correct. So this activity budget lists a city manager.
So that's the city manager's budget.
Does that include the 30% that's in water and the 30% that's in sewer?
Yes.
So the city manager's is correct and everyone else's is broken out by department.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. They're all broken out by department on that activity sheet. Those are not salaries and benefits.
Okay.
They're department costs.
They're by department. So I don't think that is a clear picture then of the city manager when it's listed that way, since 30% of his is also in sewer and 30% is also in water.
But this is activity. It isn't salary driven. This particular chart, my understanding. Is that what you not said, Cheryl?
Yeah, it basically is representing what would be shown on the detail page for the city manager, the O2 budget, which Kyle, I don't have the packet in front of me, so I don't know what page that is. And if you go to that page, it will then show at the bottom the allocation by fund, but this is the allocation by department.
Right. All right. I just wanted to make it clear that we just want to be clear with the public. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so then the revenues for 2021 are $4,071,208, which is a decrease of $59,684 from the prior year's adopted budget. Again, the city's major funds, the general fund, sewer and water funds, account for 89% of the total revenues. The general fund revenues are shown in the green graph, with the bulk of the revenue being property tax in lieu, then the Measure U sales tax, and then the Bradley Burns sale tax, and then the property taxes. And then at the bottom, there's a graph that shows the sales tax in blue and the Measure U sales tax in red. And it shows sort of how they've gone up and now they're coming back down. And as we discussed earlier, or at the last session, the 2021, we included a 10% reduction, which we may revisit that. And then we go on to the next. There was a question at the last meeting about fund balances and how the fund balances had changed. So when we're doing the budget right now for 2021, we're estimating the beginning fund balances. And the fiscal year, all the transactions aren't actually completed until almost probably mid-August. And so at that time, we then have actual beginning fund balances. And so if you look at this table, the actual beginning fund balances are column A, and those were presented to your council when I did the year-end budget report. And then the revenues and expenses and changes in reserves are basically what was shown in the adopted budget, with the ones that are slightly highlighted and the ones that are listed at the side being ones that I made changes to, because based on current information, we're doing things like we didn't spend all the funds on RIM, so therefore we're carrying that forward. So therefore I reduced the expenditures in the general fund by $26,000. General fund revenues were increased by $88,530 based on current available information on how much revenue we're going to receive in the current year. And I can go down those in detail, or you can read them. And at this point, I can answer any questions about how the fund balances are estimated and why there were changes.
I have a question. I think I'm the one that asked part of this question last time. And the one that I don't understand, and it's probably some of these carryover numbers, is that whether my packet that I had from the last year's budget said that the reserve balance was estimated to be at 4.8 million, somewhere around there. And
correct. Yeah.
Then with that 1.7, we increased. I mean, it sounded good, but I'm trying to understand that.
Yes, it did. So the estimated ending fund balance was $4,875,000, and it actually ended with $6,519,000. And that was, I tried to explain that when I did the annual year-end report, and maybe it's a process that kind of goes throughout the year. And so basically that's part of the purpose of that annual report, is to say, oh, wow, look, this is what the actual ending fund balances were. And those then fold into the next year's budget process. And so that's basically, that's how much better the city has traditionally been very conservative in the budgeting of revenues, and had, due to salary, there was a lot of salary savings in the police department and other capital projects that didn't get completed. And therefore, basically the no reserves were used, and the fund balances actually increased over the beginning ones.
You're jogging my memory back with the last year yearly report. I remember you talking. One of them I remember being that the police, because the police force was so slow, we were still trying to staff up. One question I had in there is there a difference? No, it's probably more this year noticeable, the fact that we don't have a full-time finance director, where I believe we're contracting you, but we're not paying you benefits. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And so, I mean, is there a significant savings in that, that we're doing it by doing it? And is it working to have you on a part-time basis, essentially contracting, versus a full-time finance director? Is that how's that play out?
So I might defer to the city manager on this, but I will say the budget that is proposed for 2021 has a full-time, fully benefited finance director in it.
Okay.
And the budget for, let's see, trying to think when I started. So I'm sure there was a little salary savings that contributed some savings in the general fund for 18, 19. Well, no, I started right in the current year. So I did not actually calculate that in. So like that's another item that we'll probably end up seeing the general fund balance actually better than what is being estimated as of 6/30/20 in this table right here.
Okay. That's, you're making, I think you've answered my questions enough on that. And one other, another one while I've got you here is the 4.5 million include the $200,000 contingency, or is that, or not?
The 4.5 million expenditures,
Yes,
total budget. Yes, that includes that.
it includes that. Okay, thank you.
That was it. So are there any other questions?
Are there any other questions from council?
Well, I do have other questions. I didn't know, I didn't want to take away from Cheryl if she was going to give any more explanation.
No, I think I'll let you ask questions.
Okay, the records tech, I guess this is probably for Chief Carter. That was not obvious. I see that in the budget that it's funded out of reserves versus because we didn't get the measures, whatever it was, Z. We do need the records tech in our employment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and there was something I read in the minutes that we talked about, something about animal control officer. Was that part of the records tech or not? Is that something separate?
So there has been a idea proposed that we hire a full-time person in addition to the records technician to handle code enforcement and animal control. I believe that's what you're referring.
Okay, so that's not in this budget, but that's something we discussed. Is that?
That is my understanding.
Okay. City general city wages. What do we call general city? Like a special account that said general city. What is that? What are those functions? Cheryl?
I'm not sure what you're referring to specifically.
There was like a department page.
General government.
Department. Yeah, general government.
That is, I have to refresh I believe that is the time that the community development director spends doing things like the housing element. And any time spent by that person on economic development. So that is basically Department 06.
Okay. And then that answers that. The other, the question on sewer had gone up $87,000 over without breaking down every individual line. Is there a general area why it went up in operating costs that much?
So you're now talking about how on the blue sheet, the sewer operations 50.
I don't know if it's blue. Mine are all white. It's
The one with the stripes across the.
It's page. I don't know. It's called sewer. It's in the little breakout of all of the cost of that department. It's probably a couple pages. I don't have page numbers on it.
Page 99 is 08.
It's
Sewer.
Department 08, yeah.
99
My
and
clip's
100.
probably on top of the page, but at the overall cost at the bottom, it said it was up about $87,000 from last year, and but yet we saved on some maintenance and.
So some of that is the contingencies because the contingencies wouldn't be in there. Kyle, can you put up that page?
Which page is it?
I've got page 66 and maybe it's 99. It's 99 and 100, I think.
One second.
What is the specific question before us?
What is the increase of between last year and this year? The overall sewer operations was an increase of $87,000.
Well, I think part of it is a major part of that $71,000, Frank, is in account 5,000 full-time salaries. And that's where we added a second operator so that the primary operator can have a vacation, go to some training, do things like that.
Well, these are the questions I'm at. I see 8,000. It's plus 8,000 on full-time salaries, and part-time salaries increased by about 4,000. And overtime went up by 3 or 2,500.
So the question is live, did that happen?
Well, I just understand without breaking down each individual line item. I mean, it's not going to end the world. I see that because one of the other things that we said earlier in your summary was that our water, the city's major funds are general fund and sewer, and what's general fund is included. And water and sewer is 89%. Okay, so that explains that. I thought it was just water and sewers. My eyes are getting tired and old. Not like the rest of you guys have good vision.
So if I can just chime in here real quick, I think the numbers that you're comparing for the current year budget is the 643,150 with the 678,28. So the difference is closer to 40,000, not 80,000 between the two budget years.
I was looking at the one that said 6/30/2020 was 592, and 2021 was 678. I know 630 is an estimated number.
Yeah, so 630 is an estimated, and that's going to generally be controlled mostly by personnel costs and changes. The council did add positions to the wastewater department in the last budget cycle. As the council recalls, we have gone through a number of iterations since the construction of the new wastewater plant was mandated by the state of California. And it turns out that the plant requires more staff to operate. It also requires more highly trained staff. And as the council knows, after longtime operator Rick Chikora left, we've had a hard time recruiting and retaining that qualified staff. And so there have been overall structural changes in between prior budget years. So looking at full-time salaries from back in the 2019 budget to the one proposed today, there are differences. And today what we have are 2 OIT positions to try to train people up into these positions and provide some staffing to the wastewater division.
And part of those OITs are working with the water system too.
They're mostly wastewater, but yeah, they're supposed to, everybody has to be interchangeable between the departments, but right now they're really focused in on trying to get the qualifications for wastewater because that's really where we have the biggest difficulty.
All right. I think that's all my question that I have.
I'll just chime in quickly. There was also a $30,000 that had been budgeted and not being spent for the rate study. So that contributed to the 80,000 between the estimated and proposed.
We didn't spend that, but we canceled it and then brought it back, right? It didn't get spent
Correct.
last year, and then it goes back in, right? The same thing for the water. It was a similar amount of money.
Correct.
I understood that. Thank you, though. I'm good.
Are there other questions for Cheryl? Councilmember Johnson?
None.
Councilmember Woodall?
No.
Thank you both. Okay, so where are we, City Manager?
So we'll pop back to the presentation. We've covered the position allocation table, the same number of recommended or the same number of FTEs are included in the budget as presented. We covered a lot of the detail in the workshop settings. And just to back to our general fund revenues and a little bit on the COVID situation. As the council's well aware, really what we're talking about in terms of COVID impacts up front for the city are going to be your sales tax, and you have your Measure U add-on sales tax, then you have your Bradley Burns. So right now the current projection is a 10% decline in that revenue. It's not going to be a decline that is as bad as some of the other jurisdictions, and that's just because of the mix of where the sales tax revenue is generated in Rio Dell, and a lot of the retail establishments fell under the essential category in the city of Rio Dell. But there certainly is going to be an impact, and particularly it's one that's hard to track down because the situation evolves daily. But it does appear that it is, getting worse, and that the timeline is going to be pushed out a bit. The good news is that for the city of Rio Dell, your general fund revenues, again, most of those revenues go towards supporting public safety services with the police department, are generally generated by state allocations of property taxes. So property taxes are generally very stable, and those make up about 42% of your general fund. So while you're seeing downward trends in sales tax, one of the things that is compensating for that is an increase in your cannabis fees and tax revenue. So in the last year, the tax revenue alone was budgeted at about $20,000, and that amount has been well exceeded already to date, and there's still one more quarter to go. So the increase in the cannabis fees and taxes, and we're hearing good things from our businesses in terms of their feeling in terms of longevity, is good. But the other revenues for right now are smaller but stable. One of the other issues that the city and the counties are running into outside of Rio Dell is really transient occupancy tax, and our TOT revenue is, I think, somewhere around $10,000 annually in a normal year, and we are projecting a 50% decline in that specific revenue, and that's in line with a lot of the other projections for other entities. but it amounts to a very small portion of the general fund budget. It's something we'd like to change in the future, and would be good in order to help diversify the revenue into the general fund. But for now, that's an example of one of the areas where this is not impacted. And so being a predominantly bedroom community it has some advantages in this particular situation. Our revenue mix is low but stable. And we also have some development related to a special tax, our cannabis tax, that's generating additional revenue that's helping to kind of balance out the overall picture for the upcoming fiscal year. So just a quick graph on our cannabis revenue. The dotted line represents a potential for it to come in higher than the projected amounts, and going into next year, there's a possibility there. We do have several developers still in the mix, and new ones that are currently working with staff to make proposals to the Planning Commission. So if some of those go forward, we're certainly going to see additional revenue into the city, and so it certainly would be, you know, significantly worse situation if we didn't have this new revenue stream coming into the city. In terms of just moving forward, some of the other items that the council has discussed in the past that we'd like some kind of a decision on would be this community services officer position. So this has been a concept that's been thrown about in terms of adding something to the police department for code and animal rule enforcement in the city. This would be a non-sworn position, and you know, we can come back to the council with some budget figures and some options for the council to consider. In addition, the Measure Z funding with the County of Humboldt, I do not believe that the County of Humboldt is going to be in a position to provide a Measure Z allocation to the city of Rio Dell for the upcoming year. There was some, you know, unfortunate news in the board meeting today regarding declining projections. However, Rio Dell's general fund situation is improving, and so there may be some additional room to cover the Measure Z clerical position in the police department, and help provide that support to the police department, which I do think is important. There are also some other changes down the road that are just grant carryovers when we get to final, or they may be amendments that we have to make in the future fiscal year, but they're related to grants that are already moving forward, including the ATP project, our water planning grants, and our sanitary sewer evaluation study. In addition, there are capital project carryovers. In this case, it looks like our pavement job, maintenance paving, the basic maintenance paving job is going to be able to be completed prior to the end of this fiscal year on June 30th. The slurry seal now for sure would happen towards the end of July, so that would be in the new fiscal year. So we would need to carry over the amount budgeted for this project in the current budget and move it over to the next year. So that would be another change to the capital expenditure, but again, it wouldn't be spent in this particular fiscal year. And then if there are any other changes that the council wants to make to the budget, the earlier that we, work on these and the council provides direction in terms of the CSO position or with the Measure Z funding, we can put that together and have that presented to the council for your consideration. With that, I would return it to the council to see if there's any further direction on the budget, and see if these are items that the council wants us to explore adding to the budget. and presenting that as part of a recommendation, or if there's any other direction from the council.
Thank you, City Manager. Council, are there any questions, any comments on the last comments by the City Manager?
I would be interested in,
Okay.
are we there?
Yes, go.
Okay, well, as normal, I would be interested in seeing a community service officer. See if there would be a way to get one of those into the budget.
I would also like to see if you could bring that back. Council members Wilson, Strawn, and Johnson, can you speak up and say you have nothing or something, please?
What do you want to hear?
I want to hear you either have something to say or you're fine. That's what I want to hear.
I guess to see the cost of the what do you call it, the code enforcement. I guess it's a one person is code enforcement, animal enforcement. It's just tough with the. I'm kind of on the conservative view of where COVID is at this moment. If Chief Connor, are you fully staffed in your police department, or are we down a couple officers or a officer?
We're currently down 2 officers. I have one officer one candidate who has completed his background except for the physical exam, and I'm having a hard time getting that scheduled, at least in Humboldt County, because the doctors that do that exam consider themselves to be at risk for COVID and are not currently working. He's currently scheduled for a physical on June 15th. I do not have anybody in line for the remaining opening position. And it would be possible to replace a police officer with this CSO position if that's the council's desire.
Because that's the thought I've given it. I've thought about this where we're up and down so much with, time you get an officer trained and broken in, and then they take and move on and they go somewhere else. So it's like we're always in a state that we're not fully staffed officer wise. And so if there was a way to augment that in such a way that we work between that time, you save that money like we did prior, and then instead we're using that for the code, the community service and animal rules. If there was a way to balance that, knowing that the bucket is got a seal to it, but we can utilize those funds that are available in the budget to make both things work. And it just seems like with the turnover that you're always going to have with the officers, that might be a possibility. So I think we need to find out what that's going to cost, unless it's just consider it the cost of a police officer.
It would probably, I don't know this, it's a question, not a statement, a fact. Would it be likely less cost of a CSO than a post-certified police officer?
Yeah, it would be a pretty significant cost reduction between the two.
Sure.
Is the council good with city manager and staff bringing back numbers for CSO? A comparison?
I'd like to see.
I am.
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Thank you. So that's one suggestion then. Are there any other questions of council?
Yes, Mayor Garnes, I have a couple suggestions. Certainly, I'm a fan of a community service officer. I've seen way too many violent swings in our police department staffing, where we're authorized 5 or 6 officers and Jeff and John are the only 2 on board for, better part of a year. And I believe that our city would be, in the long run, better served if we think we need 6 officers total to have 7. To have 1 extra, because we're going to be a continual training ground for police officers. They're going to get trained here, and then they're going to step up to another organization. Likewise, I feel that our records tech is a very important position, and I feel that that certainly can be funded out of the general fund. We have adequate revenue there. So those are Johnson's suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Any feedback from council on those particular suggestions? None. I definitely like CSO, and I definitely think that records tech would be something that we should fund. I don't know whether or not a fully post-certified 7th officer is within our budget constraints, but I understand what Councilmember Johnson is saying, because it is, there are swings every year with that, but the CSO and the records tech, absolutely. I think if we can put those in, that would be great.
Well, my point is, Mayor Garnes, that if we authorize it now, we're not going to get a graduate from an academy, somebody for the chief to even consider for months down the road.
That's true. That is a true statement. Yeah, I don't know dollar-wise how that plays out, but I don't have a problem with looking at it, but I don't, I'm not the consensus. I'm just another individual on the council. So basically, I think we need a consensus. I think we have a consensus on the CSO and the records tech. I don't know if we, I feel like we do. Do you feel like there is a consensus there, City Manager? Or did we lose that?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll bring that back at our next meeting, some figures for the community service officer, along with some options for the council, and the Measure Z, the clerical position in the police department.
Okay. And so, is there consensus for even looking at a 7th position, or is it, are we just want to wait on that, sit on that for a moment till we see the other numbers, and then go from there after the next meeting? Anybody? When people are watching this, every time I ask a question and people just sit and there's no response, that is just, it's kind of ridiculous. So if you could just, respond with a yes or no, that would be so awesome.
I would rather see the numbers. I would rather see the numbers come back that we've done so far, and then look at the next step.
Thank you.
I would say we're already at 500,000 in the red. So my answer is no.
Thank you.
I could look at the numbers. It doesn't hurt to take a look, as far as I'm concerned.
So I think, I don't know, City Manager.
Mayor Garnes, if I can jump in there, I think there's consensus to look at a couple different options. So we're happy to bring that back for the council.
Are there other questions? Were you going to say something, Julie?
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the staff?
Oh.
City Manager, are there any public comments?
I am seeing none, Mayor Garnes.
City Clerk, are there any emails?
No emails.
Thank you. And so I think that, City Manager, you feel that you have enough direction and we can close this item out for the evening?
Yes, Mayor Garnes.
Thank you. And we will move on to council reports.
I have a brief report on HWMA. We met last week. And one of the topics, probably one of the more prominent discussions, they had their budget, which was pretty well finalized. But the other one was the recycling charges. This recycling thing, because of COVID, and not just COVID, but the price of aluminum cans went from, I think, $80-some a ton down to 30-something, not considering COVID. And so that's where the recycling people really make their money. The rest of the part was recycling, pretty much statewide, has quit taking the CRV money or the CRV turn-ins, and the people that were going to buy it, even if you bought it, they wouldn't buy it from you because they don't want to mess with it. The Recology, who is our franchise hauler, has looked at adding a fee to pick up our recyclables, and the best I could get without in that meeting, it would probably be less than $1 a month increase on our recycling charge, and so that's in the flux of being determined probably at the next, possibly the next HWMA meeting. So it's not a significant increase, but it may be you may see $1 increase.
Frank, is anyone at HWMA spoken to whether the state or the feds, whoever puts that 5 or 10 cents on the containers, because at this point we're paying for it and we're not getting it back. So
that question was brought up by a couple of us. I broached it, and so did Leslie from Eureka. And the state's getting the money, and they ain't giving it back. So they've got it in a whatever box they keep it in, and from it's kind of one of those questions that was kind of ambiguous, but the answer is basically what you just said. That they're getting it. I also see stuff in the budget that the states, and I'm a real fan of the state government. They're really gonna all of these things that seem like really great giveaways to help us through the COVID is going to cost somebody. The bill comes due, and so we've already seen that they're going to cut schools, they're going to cut all kinds of stuff, and this money that's in that CRC fund is, I think that's something they're going to hang on to. They actually want to do away with us going back and turning the stuff in, because it's the recycling and the garbage is considered an essential business for sure, but it's also a very dangerous business because of one is the contamination of recycled bottles. Who wants to get recycled bottles back? And not all agencies. Our agency is that recycles the Recology is pretty automated, and they don't touch stuff now. It's all shooken down in containers. But a lot of the places around the country aren't that automated. There's a lot of contamination, and so there's less of a desire for recycling. And if we don't take an effort as ourselves to recycle, it's going to end up in landfills, and that's not a good solution.
But they're not accepting it at this time, are they?
No, they won't accept your CRC turn-in. None of that is being accepted locally or statewide. They all take them to pretty much a couple of distributors. And in the other countries that were buying them, China cut this off way back. The recycling thing has been dying. It used to be a premium, and now you're seeing it's almost a thing to, like, the good thing to do. Let's not leave a mattress on the side of Blue Slide Road and pick it up and do something with it. But they have additional fees for all kinds of different things that you bring in to the carpet and different that you bring into the waste center. They've got additional charges to deal with it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other reports from council?
Mayor Garnes, I traveled out of county this last weekend, and as a result of that, this morning I went in and had a COVID test, and I'm told that between 48 and 72 hours, I'll get the results of it. So it's not a bad deal. I mean, it stings for about 2 seconds, and that was it for my old schnoz.
Right. Well, thanks for that. I was going to just remind everyone that there's a county call on Thursdays at 2:00, and everyone can call in on it, all the council members, I mean to say, and ask a question, and I will defer. They often say one person to ask all the questions or ask the question. I'm happy to defer to anyone who has a question that they can, so that they can ask the question. You don't have to filter it through me. And the health department's there, but Dr. Frankovich is there. The sheriff is there. Any questions we have about any of the rules that they are that are being implemented, any questions about just about just how things are going, reopening, shelter in place, numbers, statistics. You can ask those questions directly and they will have an answer for you. And I really encourage all of the council. I mean, you know, Eureka usually has 3 or 4 members. Fortuna has members and their city manager. Kyle's usually on every call too. And I would just encourage the council to engage and ask some questions. And because you might have questions, what's helpful is other people ask questions that you hadn't really thought of, but when they ask it, it's actually a very good question. And so that is something that I would encourage everyone to do. It's, everyone gets the email, is my understanding, with the phone number. If anyone needs it, I can send it to them. And it's at 2:00 on Thursdays. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's just a lot of numbers, but the opportunity to ask for clarification is there. And I think that we should all take advantage of it, because then we can answer our constituents' questions if they have any. So that's all I have.
Mayor Garnes?
Yes.
Usually 2:00 is a tough time for me because of the mill.
Oh, right,
schedule.
right.
But I do have a question that for if I could pass on for you
Okay.
to ask, and that is, they quote the number. They say, when they say, okay, there's so many new cases and there's been so many hospitalizations. Could they give us a number that tell us how many current hospitalizations there are?
Okay.
Because some have gone in and then some have gone out. But okay, today we have 3 cases, past and present. That's
okay. I can definitely ask that question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So if there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor Garnes, I'd move for adjournment.
Second, all in favor?
Yay.
Say aye.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.